Alright, so these are my thoughts on the Evertune bridge for the guitar. I'm going to go over the pros and cons of this bridge system, and I'll give you some points so that you can decide for yourself if this bridge system is right for you. This is not a review of the guitars mentioned in this video. Also, I am not sponsored by any of the brands shown in this video. I am also not a guitar virtuoso. I'm not famous or in any kind of amazing touring band. I'm just some guy on the internet who clearly likes guitars, as you can see behind me. I do the casual online music thing. My music is on streaming services, and I make YouTube videos. So let's jump right in. First, let's go over the ease of setup of this bridge system. So there is one tool you use for adjusting every part of this bridge, whether it's tuning the bridge, whether it's setting the string height, or whether it's setting the intonation of each string. I do have to mention, because it's a mechanical system, every part of it can get stuck, and you only have the one tool on the outside. But the quick fix for this, if you're looking for the fix, is to down tune everything and loosen the tension until it bottoms out, and then you can tighten things back up, you can tune back up, and everything will work again. I've owned a good deal of guitars that do have this Evertune system, and this has worked every time, so I can say with confidence that this will probably work for you. And speaking of working, does this bridge work as advertised? Does it keep things in tune? Well, the short answer is yes, it works. It's not magic, but it works. It's a mechanical system, so it's a bunch of springs working against the tension of the strings. You can think of it as basically one Floyd Rose system or a double locking system per string. So of course, if it gets stuck, you can bottom it out by down tuning all the way and then tuning back up, and you can tell it'll be down tuned all the way, because when you're reducing the tension at the tuning heads, eventually it'll bottom out. And you can tell when you've bottomed out, because if you're reducing the tension at the tuning heads, the bridge system will stay in tune to a point, and then all of a sudden it'll start going flat when you're tuning it down, and that's when you know you've bottomed out. And then you can start tuning up again, and things will stop being stuck. And we'll talk about the opposite effect if you tune up a lot very soon. But basically, because it is one spring system per string, you can kind of see a little bit, there is no tone block to it. So you will lose a little bit of sustain. So if you're trying to sustain long notes for a long time, if you're trying to do your Carlos Santana impression, maybe this won't work for you. But it doesn't lose that much sustain, so unless you're trying to do crazy extreme things like that, this will work for you. So it will hold its tuning, and this is especially valuable if you're using a distorted tone and you have those extra harmonics from the distortion. This will defeat pitch drift, so if you're tuning down low, you don't have to worry about hitting the low strings especially really hard. It won't pitch drift or go sharp anymore. Of course, if this is part of your sound, that might be an issue, but if you're trying to stay in tune, this will be a godsend. This will be perfect. If you're trying to do distorted tones, like adding a third or something like that, this will hold the tuning really well, and this will actually sound really good, really clean, especially under distortion. Or your sus2 chords or whatever, it'll sound really good too, because there won't be any kind of question of how hard you're hitting it. There won't be any question of intonation or staying in tune, because after you set it up right, it'll hold it really well. It'll sound really good, really crisp. Of course, if you're playing chords or triads or whatever on higher strings too, that's also extremely valuable. And staying in tune is really good for when you're recording too. Of course, when you're playing live, obviously you want to stay in tune, that's a given. But when you're recording, when people hear recordings, I feel like you can really hear the mistakes of the guitar player. So if you're out of tune, that becomes really apparent. So this will save you a lot of the time. But when playing live or recording, you do have to play the guitar. So let's talk about the playability of this system. What are the implications of this tension-based system? Well, it's true, the system does hold your strings in tune, but there are different zones to it. If you tune it up like you would normally, it would be in the zone where even if you bend it, it won't make any difference because of the spring system. So you won't have any bending capabilities. You have to actually increase the tension to this so-called bend zone, and that is where you're almost bottoming out the system because of tension. I described briefly before where you would bottom out the system by reducing the tension. But if you do it the other way, where the system is almost bottomed out because there's too much tension, that's how you achieve the bending. And this is how you more accurately simulate a fixed bridge. Of course, because you're doing this, there's going to be more tension than usual on the strings. And that's to get this into the bend zone. You have to add more tension. And so by doing that, bending the strings is going to be a little more difficult unless you lighten the gauge of your strings. This also means that vibrato is going to be slightly more difficult too. So it's not going to be extremely difficult. It's not going to be a super hardship. But if you're doing a lot of practice, like a lot of vibrato practice or bending practice, and you're practicing over a long period of time, that's going to add up. Or if you're doing a lot of recording and you have to do many, many takes because you're a mere mortal, like me. I'm a mere mortal. I don't get things right perfectly the first time or the second time or the 10th time. It takes a few tries. So all those takes for every few measures or every 10 measures or whatever you do, that's going to add up too. So you do have to keep that in mind if you do a lot of vibrato or bend techniques. Of course, though, it's not all doom and gloom, because I was talking about 6-string before, but with the extended range guitars like baritones or 7 strings or even 8 strings, it's very nice because it actually helps the playability. Usually you have to play really lightly so that you don't put things into pitch drift. But with the Evertune, you can hit that 7th string or that low string as hard as you want, and it will not pitch drift. So when you're either playing live and you're full of adrenaline, or you're recording and you're really trying to get that perfect take and you're maybe tensing up a little bit because, again, you're a mortal human like me, and you hit the string a bit too hard, it's not going to go sharp and ruin the take. And if you care about math and physics and stuff, there's this phenomenon called beating, or as I call it, acoustic beating, where if you're out of tune and you're in a low frequency, basically, because of the harmonics and stuff like that, from the fundamental frequency, things will just sound bad effectively. So this will prevent that, this bridge system, because it will hold it in tune mechanically. So that'll help playability because it will keep things in tune. It will keep it from drifting. So you won't have to worry too much about hitting it too hard. And if you're just pushing down on the strings, you don't really feel the extra tension. But again, if you're using techniques that fight the tension, like vibrato or really extreme bends, that's going to be a hindrance. That's going to wear down your fingers. That's going to be some extra tension to fight against. So, would I recommend this bridge system? Well, as you can see behind me, I have many different guitars. Some of them are fixed bridge, a lot of them are double locking tremolos, some of which I've blocked, most of which that I've blocked. Some of them have Evertunes. It's really a mixed bag. So would I recommend this? Well, obviously I wouldn't pick just one bridge style. I've got a bunch of them. But that's a pretty safe answer. I can't just tell you that. So yes, I would recommend this bridge system. If I had to pick one bridge system and I was doing what I do, I would pick the Evertune bridge system. Being in tune is extremely important for recordings because I find you can hear if you're out of tune or making any mistakes, especially when you're listening to recordings versus playing live. It also helps too because if you're playing a lot of guitar, whether it's practice or recordings or whatever, you can start to hear when you're out of tune. And that really pulls you out of the moment if you're trying to either practice and get things perfect, or if you're trying to get the perfect take. So if you're in tune because of this system, because it forces you to be in tune, you don't have to worry about that kind of thing. You can just pick up the guitar and play when you have an idea, when you still have the energy to do so. You know, maybe you have a day job and you only have a few minutes of guitar playing in you. You know, we've all been there. You have other responsibilities that you've had to take care of, so you only have a few minutes to pick up the guitar, maybe record a take, maybe practice a few lines, a few shred scales or something like that. Having the assurance that you're in tune can go a long way. If you're playing live, there's of course temperature and humidity to think about. If you're backstage or in the green room, it could be a certain temperature, certain humidity. If you're traveling from where you practice or your own home to somewhere maybe across the state, across the country, somewhere where it's colder or hotter, your guitar might go a little bit crazy. So having a little bit of assurance that this bridge will at least help you stay in tune, that'll go a super long way. That way you can worry about loading out for the gig. You can worry about if you're going to get paid by the promoter who's organizing the show. You can worry about actually playing your set right. And you won't have to worry about if your guitar is going crazy out of tune. Basically having to worry about tuning whether you're live, at home, recording, practicing, it can bring you out of the moment. Now, obviously, I would not recommend the Evertune bridge if you're trying to do double locking tremolo whammy tricks, because obviously it's not a double locking tremolo. You can't do dive bombs on this, just like you can't do dive bombs on a fixed bridge, obviously. And if you do a lot of bends and you're used to a different kind of bridge system and you like it a lot, then maybe this won't work for you, because if you're fighting that tension all the time and then you introduce a bridge that'll potentially add some more tension, then that might be counterintuitive or counterproductive for you. And if you need something that'll help you sustain, what I personally prefer is a blocked double locking bridge system, because then you get that tone block. You can add a super thick tone block so you get the sustain and you get the lock at the nut and all that stuff. I do personally prefer that, but a fixed bridge works for sustain too. But because this is a mechanical system with a lot of moving parts, it does take away a bit of sustain. I find with the 7-string versions of it, it takes a bit less sustain. But for staying in tune, for holding things in tune, I do find that price worth it. Because most of the time I don't need to hold like 4 measures of whole notes or something like that. Most of the time I just need it to be in tune when I'm playing my rhythm chords, and then I do my little leads, things like that. When I'm doing recordings and I need to keep doing takes, I need it to stay in tune. So this really helps a lot. And you might be asking, does it rob some of the tone? Well, that depends. Like, what part of the guitar adds the most tone to you? Is it your amp settings, your plug-in settings? Is it your pickups that makes the most difference? Is the kind of bridge you use, does that make the most difference? Because everyone cares about different things. I do have a Solar that has a Floyd Rose, and it has the Duncan Solar pickups. And then I do have an Evertune Solar also that has the Duncan Solar pickups, and they do sound different, but they also have different body woods. The one with the Evertune is made of alder, and the one with the Floyd Rose is made of ash. So would it be the tone wood? Would it be the type of bridge? Are the pickups slightly wound differently? There's so many variables, it's hard to say. I do find on average for the 6 strings, it does make the tone sound not thinner, but I find it sounds a certain way where you can layer it a lot and it won't step on itself. It won't step on its own toes. So maybe that's less mids. I'm not 100% sure. Again, I'm just some guy on the internet. But maybe that's some helpful information. Overall, I don't find that enough to not use the bridge for when I really need to stay in tune. So did this help you? Was this useful information? Do you have any questions, comments? Leave it down in the comment section below. You know this is YouTube, so I have to say the YouTube things, okay? Be sure to like the video, comment, subscribe, share the video, print out every frame and mail it, give it to your neighbors, your coworkers, all that stuff. And as always, peace.